You know that feeling when you first move into a new place?
Oh, yeah, the empty apartment feeling.
Exactly, yeah. You've got the keys, you walk through the door, and the space just feels entirely devoid of your presence. Like, even if the previous tenant left some furniture behind, it doesn't really feel like it belongs to you yet.
Right, it's not yours.
Right, and you end up, like, pacing around.
Yeah.
You subconsciously run your hand along the counter, or maybe you nudge a chair a few inches to the left.
To do something, yeah.
Yeah, because you rarely just walk in and sit perfectly still in the middle of the room. You have this, like, compulsion to interact with the space, to alter it, basically to prove to your own nervous system that you occupy this territory now.
Well, establishing spatial dominance is actually a fundamental requirement for a nervous system to downregulate.
Okay, wait, what does that mean exactly?
I mean, before higher order biological functions can operate optimally, things like, deep sleep, digestion, or even social bonding, an organism has to physically interact with its environment. It has to confirm the perimeter is secure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that physical alteration of the space literally lowers ambient cortisol levels. It tells the brain, okay, we are safe here.
That is so fascinating because, we tend to think of that nesting instinct as this uniquely human psychological trait, like something tied to our complex modern lives.
Right, like picking out curtains or whatever.
Exactly. But today, in this deep dive, we are going to observe that exact same biological imperative playing out on a microscopic, highly concentrated scale.
We really are. It's a completely different world.
It is. We are diving into a tiny, self-contained aquatic universe. Specifically, our source material today is a journal entry from this incredibly meticulous hobbyist named Aang.
Meticulous is definitely the right word for
There,
it.
totally. The entry is titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 302. And just pausing on that number for a second. Part 302, that gives you a sense of the sheer volume of observation we are dealing with here.
Yeah, a catalog of 302 entries indicates an observer who has moved far beyond just the superficial aspects of a hobby.
Right. This isn't just someone casually watching fish.
Exactly. We are looking at the notes of someone who is decoding the micromechanisms of biology and environment. This level of documentation suggests an active attempt to basically reverse engineer the variables that dictate animal behavior.
Which is exactly why we're looking at it. So our mission for this deep dive is to see what this specific entry, which, by the way, documents the journey of a newly acquired pair of Kribensis cichlids.
Scientifically known as pelvicachromis-pulcher.
Right, thank you. So we want to see what observing this single pair of fish can actually teach us. We're exploring what careful daily observation reveals about environmental adaptation, the physical mechanisms of biological signaling, and really the underlying philosophy of how we acquire complex practical skills.
It's a lot packed into one little tank.
It really is. So, okay, let's unpack this because Aang's journal drops us right into a very specific moment of environmental transition for these cichlids.
Yeah, the entry begins by documenting the pair's initial orientation to their tank. But rather than just passive acclimation like we were talking about earlier, the male fish is engaging in aggressive environmental manipulation.
He's not just sitting still in the new apartment.
Definitely not. Aang notes that the male has started to continuously dig around the fine construction sand, specifically, concentrating his efforts near the coral substrates and this provided terracotta pot.
Bringing back that moving in analogy, the fish isn't just floating there accepting the tank's default layout. He is terraforming.
That's a great way to put it, terraforming.
Yeah, he's unpacking his boxes and moving the sofa. He is actively remodeling the fine construction sand to suit his own spatial requirements.
And what's fascinating here is Aang's methodology in reading the tank. Because Aang provided the terracotta pod to serve as an artificial cave, right?
Which is like the standard shelter structure for this species, I think.
Exactly. But Aang doesn't just assume the fish is utilizing the pod just because it's there. He acts as this, underwater forensic observer.
Oh, I love that. Underwater detective.
Right. He deduces that the male actually prefers to linger near the exterior side of the pod, basing this conclusion entirely on the fluid dynamics and the sheer volume of displaced sand on the outside perimeter.
So he's reading the footprint of the behavior rather than, projecting his own intentions onto the fish. Like, I put a cave here, you must be in the cave.
Yes, exactly. He's looking at what the fish actually did.
And the choice of fine construction sand seems highly intentional on Aang's part, too, because if this were coarse Scrabble, the fish couldn't even perform this behavior, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Cichlids are heavily geophagine.
Wait, geophagine?
Yeah, that basically means they interact with their environment by sifting substrate through their mouths and gills. They're earth eaters.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So coarse gravel can physically damage their delicate gill filaments. By providing fine construction sand, Ang allows the fish to exhibit its natural sifting behavior to forage for microorganisms.
Right.
But more importantly, it allows the fish to act as an aquatic engineer.
An engineer? How so?
Well, the male is using that fine sand to alter the hydrodynamics of the tank floor. He is piling sand to create barriers that manipulate the water current.
To make it safer.
Yes, ensuring a low flow zone where future offspring wouldn't just get swept away.
That is so smart. So the terracotta pot is really merely a structural anchor. The displaced sand around it is the actual architecture.
Exactly.
And that environmental adaptation, that active terraforming it, has to happen first. The fish has to secure the physical perimeter and optimize the water flow before any other biological priority can take over.
Because once that low flow zone is established, the biological calculus in the tank fundamentally shifts.
Right.
The fish stop focusing on the sand and they start focusing on each other.
Because they finally feel safe.
Exactly. Once that baseline of security is physically constructed, the fish no longer need to expend massive amounts of caloric energy on stress responses or defense.
Those biological resources are freed up.
Yep. The environment transitions from a space of vulnerability to a space of prosperity, and the fish pair can actually initiate the bonding sequence.
And this bonding is not some abstract behavioral concept where they just swim in synchronized patterns. Ang observes a literal physiological transformation taking place.
It's incredible to read about.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting because bonding for these Kribensis cichlids involves a vascular and pigmentary reallocation. Ang notes that a highly visible magenta coloration is beginning to emerge on the bellies of both the male and the female.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, this visual shift is driven by a complex network of chromatophores.
Chromatophores.
Right, which are the pigment-containing cells in the fish's dermal layer.
Okay, got it.
So in aquatic environments, stress hormones like cortisol cause these chromatophores to contract. It effectively drains the animal of its vibrancy.
Which is a defensive mechanism, right?
Exactly. A stressed fish becomes a pale fish to avoid predatory detection when it feels its environment is unsecure.
They are essentially turning down their own volume to blend in with the background.
That's a perfect analogy. But when that physical territory is secured through the terraforming we just discussed, the endocrine system halts the production of cortisol.
Because the perimeter is safe.
Right. And it switches to producing reproductive hormones. These hormones signal the chromatophores to expand, flooding the dermal layer with pigment.
Ah, so that's where the magenta comes from.
Exactly. The emergence of that striking magenta color serves as a measurable visual metric of metabolic surplus.
The biology is literally stating that the environment is stable enough to afford the high biological cost of signaling a mate.
Yes. It is nature's equivalent of a status indicator light turning from red to green.
The sand was moved, the hydrodynamics were optimized, and the endocrine system responds by investing energy into the partnership. You can physically watch the relationship bloom in magenta.
It's beautiful, really.
It is. But reading through this specific entry, there is a sudden admission from Ang that completely shifts the context of all this meticulous observation.
Yeah, this part really stood out. The author introduces a deliberate variable regarding the biological quality of the subjects themselves.
Right. Ang is tracking the fluid dynamics of the displaced sand. He's monitoring the chromatophore expansion on their bellies. And then he casually notes that the Kribensis cichlids he purchased are not prime specimens.
Not at all.
He explicitly suspects they are a rejected batch. He knows they are sub-tier fish.
It is a striking moment of analytical detachment.
Yeah.
I mean, he is fully aware that he is not working with pristine show-quality genetics.
So what does this all mean? Because I have to push back hard on this methodology.
Oh, really? How come?
Well, if you are a practitioner dedicated enough to write over 300 journal entries on fish keeping, why would you willingly purchase a rejected batch? If he's practicing his breeding techniques on sub-tier fish, isn't he risking learning the wrong lessons?
In what way?
Like a rejected batch might have deep genetic deficiencies that make them inherently harder to breed, or they might exhibit abnormal behaviors.
Right, that's a fair point.
That could frustrate a practitioner into making the wrong adjustments. Or worse, quitting entirely. It feels like trying to learn high performance driving in a car with a failing transmission. You're fighting the equipment. You're not learning the skill.
I get that. But this raises an important question about the scientific method as applied to skill acquisition. We really have to separate genetic variables from environmental variables here.
Okay, how so?
Well, Ang explicitly states his current overarching goal is the evaluation of breeding dwarf cichlids. His focus is on mastering the external parameters.
Things like the water flow and the sand.
Exactly. Temperature, pH, diet, substrate mechanics. If he purchases $500 genetically flawless showfish and they fail to breed, the financial and emotional loss is catastrophic.
The stakes would just be way too high to experiment.
Right. By utilizing a much more affordable, rejected batch, Ang creates a low-stakes prototyping environment.
Oh, I see.
The baseline instinct to breed, which is driven by those environmental cues we talked about, remains intact regardless of the animal's aesthetic market value.
So the biology works the same even if they aren't pretty.
Exactly. If this sub-tier pair fails to reproduce, Ang knows the failure likely lies in his manipulation of the water parameters or the diet, not the fish's inherent drive.
He is isolating his own skill as an operator from the quality of the instrument he is operating.
Precisely.
You know, if you are listening to this and you've been putting off learning coding because you can't afford a high-end laptop, or maybe you haven't started learning photography because you feel you need a professional-grade camera body, Ang's methodology is a direct challenge to that paralysis.
It really is.
He recognizes that the biological mechanics, the digging, the chromatophore expansion, the mating rituals, they operate on the same fundamental rules whether the fish costs $5 or $50.
Yeah, and we frequently use the pursuit of premium materials as a sophisticated form of procrastination.
Oh man, that is so true. We do.
It shields us from the vulnerability of being a beginner. But Ang bypasses that friction entirely. He demonstrates this profound practical wisdom.
Which is to start with what you have.
Right. Start with accessible materials, isolate the environmental variables, master the process, and only introduce high-grade materials once the fundamental mechanics are actually understood.
It completely reframes the concept of a starter project. He isn't expecting perfection from this rejected batch. He is expecting data.
And Ang doesn't just sit back and wait for that data to arrive passively either.
No, he doesn't. Now that the fish have engineered the sand and the magenta colors indicate a stable bond, his journal entry outlines a highly specific intervention to basically force the next phase of the evaluation.
Yeah, the documentation shifts from retrospective observation to prospective action. Having confirmed the environmental baseline is secure, Ang outlines his strategy to actively trigger the reproductive cycle.
He notes that in the coming days, he is going to switch the tank to a higher-grade fish pellet. And his specific strategy is to feed the female fish as much as possible to prepare her for breeding.
Which is crucial.
It's less like a marathon runner carb loading and more like a bear gorging on salmon before winter hibernation. She needs a massive targeted surplus to physically synthesize the eggs.
Right, because the biological mechanism at play here is vitellogenesis.
Vitellogenesis.
Yes, the process of yolk formation. Developing hundreds of viable eggs is arguably the most metabolically expensive process a female fish will undergo.
So she needs a lot of energy.
A ton. She cannot synthesize the necessary lipid-protein complexes from a standard maintenance diet. She requires a massive influx of exogenous amino acids and fatty acids.
So the transition to a higher grade pellet isn't just about, giving them a treat.
Oh, no.
It's about providing the exact biochemical building blocks required for vitellogenesis.
Precisely. And by heavily feeding the female a diet rich in specialized lipids, Ang is artificially simulating seasonal abundance.
Seasonal abundance, like what would happen in the wild?
Exactly. In a wild river system, the onset of the rainy season washes an enormous amount of insects and detritus into the water.
Ah, I get it.
That sudden, dramatic spike in high-quality protein is the primary evolutionary trigger. It signals to the cichlids that it is a prosperous, safe time to reproduce.
So Ang is hacking their environment. He's using nutrition as the catalyst to tell their biology that the rainy season has officially arrived in this little glass box.
Yeah, he transitions from a passive observer, noting the fluid dynamics of the sand, to an active participant, artificially forcing an evolutionary trigger.
Wow.
He is manipulating the resource abundance to test if he has successfully mapped the variables of dwarf cichlid reproduction.
It is a highly calculated manipulation. He has removed the reliance on chance by layering security. First the physical territory, then the social bond, and finally the nutritional surplus.
He is systematically proving that biological milestones are not random occurrences, right? They are predictable reactions to specific environmental inputs.
When you step back and look at the trajectory of the single entry, Part 302, It provides such an elegant blueprint for understanding complex systems.
It really does.
I mean, we started with the physical architecture of settling in. We saw a male Kribensis Cichlid utilizing fine construction sand, not coarse gravel, to geophaginously re-engineer the tank's hydrodynamics.
Proving that physical interaction with a space is the prerequisite for downregulating a nervous system.
Right, which subsequently allowed for the observation of biological signaling. The absence of cortisol allowed reproductive hormones to trigger the chromatophores, flooding the dermal layer with that magenta pigment.
It provided a visual metric that the environment had transitioned from a state of defense to a state of prosperity.
Exactly. And then we confronted the philosophy of the rejected batch. We explored why a practitioner with over 300 journal entries would intentionally prototype with sub-tier genetics.
Which highlighted the importance of isolating environmental variables, mastering fundamental skills in a low-stakes environment, rather than waiting for pristine conditions or, premium equipment.
And culminating in the deliberate triggering of atelogenesis. By introducing high-lipid pellets and simulating seasonal abundance, the observer utilized targeted nutrition to actively force the biological milestone of reproduction.
It is a dense, incredibly rich framework derived from a single day's observation of a small glass box.
And for you listening, I think the most applicable takeaway centers on that prototyping mindset. The mechanics of growth and the rules of your environment function the exact same way, whether you are starting a business in a garage or learning a skill with borrowed tools.
Absolutely. The variables of success are learned in the dirt, not in the premium upgrades. Start where you are with the materials you currently have access to and master the fundamentals.
Because the operator's understanding of the environment must always precede the refinement of the tools.
True expertise is built on the capacity to read and manipulate the baseline conditions.
And, it leaves me with this final thought. Reflecting on that initial instinct we talked about to move the sofa when you enter a new apartment, if the granular mechanics of displaced sand and the lipid content of a targeted diet can so completely dictate the biological and relational milestones of these cichlids, how much of our own human milestones are dictated the exact same way?
That's a deep question.
I mean, think about our readiness to form deep bonds or our capacity to advance to the next major stage of our careers. How much of our progress is subtly governed by the environmental hydrodynamics and the nutritional foundations we unknowingly build or, fail to build around ourselves?
Well, we definitely prefer to view ourselves as autonomous agents,
Yeah.
But we remain biological entities profoundly tethered to the quality of our immediate habitats.
Something to carefully consider the next time you feel the sudden urge to rearrange your living room or upgrade the quality of your own diet.